The bitter, metallic taste of 24-hour emergency room exhaustion clung to my throat as I dragged my stiff legs toward the hospital's revolving glass doors. I am Dr. Alara Lawson, a 30-year-old attending physician in the emergency department of Northwood General Hospital, one of the top tertiary medical centers in the state. For an entire grueling night shift, I had sutured lacerations, stabilized critical trauma patients, fought through multiple cardiac arrests, and mediated endless family disputes beside hospital beds. My eyes burned with unrelenting fatigue, my shoulders ached from hours of leaning over operating tables, and every muscle in my body screamed for sleep and reprieve. All I craved in that moment was a hot shower, a quiet bed, and a few hours of undisturbed rest after a shift that had pushed my physical and mental limits to the brink. The early morning winter wind sliced through my thin hospital scrubs, sharp and icy, sweeping across the empty sidewalk and stirring up tiny flurries of fallen frost. The sky was still dim, a murky indigo gray hovering just before dawn, and the hospital corridor behind me had finally fallen into the quiet lull that only came after a chaotic overnight shift. I clutched my worn medical bag tighter, ready to step through the spinning glass doors and leave the blood, chaos, and pressure of the emergency room behind me until the phone buried deep in my scrub pocket vibrated violently, sharp and insistent, shattering the fragile peace of the early morning. I froze mid-step, my brow instinctively furrowing with the familiar dread of an emergency recall. No emergency doctor ever truly clocked out, not when lives hung in the balance and the ER never stopped running. I fumbled for the phone, swiping the call open instantly, already bracing myself to turn back and rush into the fray once more. The nurse station had nurses panicked. Breathless voice exploded through the receiver, urgent and unyielding, leaving no room for refusal or delay. Dr. Lawson, you have to come back immediately. We just admitted a severe blunt force trauma critical case. The chief of surgery personally ordered you to scrub in and take over the operation right now. No exceptions. Get back to the OR at once. My body reacted on pure professional instinct before my mind could process the request. My shoulders squared, my tired muscles tensed, and my feet shifted backward, ready to pivot and sprint straight back into the sterile operating room. For 7 years, I had dedicated every waking moment to emergency medicine. I had never turned down a critical case, never shirked a surgical responsibility, never prioritized my own rest over a patient's life. Duty, professionalism, and the oath I had sworn as a physician had been the unshakable core of my entire career. No matter how exhausted I was, no matter how brutal the shift, I always answered the call of a critical patient. But in that split second, everything changed. A phenomenon I could never explain, never anticipate, and never have prepared for unfolded directly before my eyes, rewriting my entire fate in a single heartbeat. The air directly in front of the revolving glass doors rippled and warped, shimmering like heat haze rising off scorching asphalt, glowing with a faint, otherworldly silver luminescence. Bright, luminous text, thin, paper ribbon-like streams of glowing letters, materialized out of absolute thin air, rolling rapidly across my field of vision, unmissable, unignorable, burning into my line of sight with terrifying clarity. This was no hallucination, no exhaustion-induced delusion, no trick of the dim morning light. The words were solid, present, and brutally truthful, a premonition sent to save my life. Do not enter the operating room. Do not touch this patient. The patient is already brain dead. They are dragging you in to take the fall for the surgery chief's daughter. This family has extreme power and cruel methods. If you scrub in, your medical career will be ruined forever. You will be arrested and sentenced for medical malpractice and manslaughter. The public scandal and criminal conviction will drive your parents to commit suicide. Every glowing word landed in my chest like a sledgehammer, smashing through my professional instinct, my fatigue, and my rational worldview in an instant. MY blood turned ice cold in my veins. My breath caught violently in my throat, and my entire body locked up rigid on the concrete sidewalk, my boots frozen solid against the frosty ground. The world around me blurred for a split second, the hum of the hospital generators, the howl of the morning wind, the distant beep of emergency monitors all fading into a muted background hum. I had always been a rational, science-driven physician that I trusted data, diagnostics, medical imaging, and clinical evidence above all else. I had never believed in premonitions, supernatural visions, or fate. I had spent my entire adult life relying on logic, skill, and rigorous medical training to save lives and solve clinical crises. But standing there, staring at those unearthly glowing words hovering in the air before me, I felt a primal, bone-deep terror I had never known in my life. This was not fear of overwork, fear of surgery failure, or fear of professional pressure. This was the cold, certain dread of impending doom, a complete life collapse, criminal conviction, familial destruction, and irreversible ruin, all mapped out for me if I took one single step back into that operating room. The wind howled louder, whipping my hair across my frozen face, the frigid air seeping through my scrubs and burrowing into my marrow. Every second ticked by like an eternity, torturous and drawn out, as I stood suspended between the life I had known and the catastrophic fate the premonition had laid bare before me. In those agonizing few seconds, I did not hesitate. I did not doubt. I did not dismiss the vision as exhaustion or stress. Some deep, primitive survival instinct roared to life inside me, overriding 7 years of professional habit and every logical thought in my brain. I chose to believe the glowing premonition completely. I chose to bet everything I had, my career, my reputation, my freedom, my family's lives, on this invisible, unprovable warning. I would not walk into that trap. I would not be the scapegoat for a powerful man's corruption. I would not lose everything and destroy my parents for a crime I never committed. My eyes darted frantically across the concrete sidewalk, scanning every inch of the early morning street for an escape, for any way to vanish from the hospital's surveillance, to avoid being dragged back into the ore before I could save myself. My gaze locked instantly on a section of the sidewalk cordoned off by flimsy, bright orange safety netting, an open, exposed municipal utility shaft, its metal grating removed, dropping straight down into the dark, endless underground abyss of the city's sewer and tunnel system. It was a dangerous, unregulated drop, a raw, terrifying void, but it was my only escape. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached, squeezed my eyes shut against the vertigo and terror coiling in my stomach, tensed every muscle in my body, and threw every ounce of my strength forward. I jumped without hesitation, diving straight down into the dark, gaping abyss, vanishing completely from the sidewalk outside Northwood General Hospital. The fall was fast, brutal, and disorienting. Wind screamed past my ears as I plummeted downward, the dim morning light vanishing entirely as I crashed into the pitch-black underground tunnel. My body slammed hard against a damp concrete maintenance platform halfway down the shaft, the impact knocking the breath clean out of my lungs and sending sharp, blazing pain shooting through my ribs and shoulders. I bit back a scream, gritting through the agony, knowing that any sound, any delay, would lead to my capture and certain ruin. I collapsed onto the cold, slimy concrete, gasping for air, my entire body trembling from adrenaline and pain. The underground tunnel was pitch black, reeking of damp mildew, rusted metal, and faint sewer humidity. It was silent, isolated, and completely cut off from the world above. No cameras, no witnesses, no hospital staff to find me. I had successfully escaped the immediate trap, but I was far from safe. I forced myself to push through the dizziness and pain, scrambling unsteadily to my feet, my hands brushing against the rough, damp tunnel walls as I leaned against them for support. My mind raced at 1,000 miles an hour, piecing together the full truth of the frame-up the premonition had exposed, connecting every vague, unspoken irregularity I had witnessed in the hospital over the past few months. Dr. Julian Croft, the chief of surgery at Northwood General Hospital, was not just a senior medical director. He was the most powerful figure in the entire regional medical system. His family controlled multiple private medical groups, held deep connections in local government and judicial departments, and wielded absolute power over the hospital's personnel, promotions, disciplinary judgments, and even medical dispute rulings. For years, he had operated with unbridled arrogance and impunity, using his authority to cover up medical errors, suppress dissent, and punish subordinates who dared to cross him. His only daughter, Lila Croft, was a newly licensed surgical resident under his direct supervision. Spoiled, reckless, and clinically incompetent, Lila had always relied entirely on her father's power to cover up her constant medical mistakes. She had no real clinical skill, no sense of medical responsibility, and often performed unauthorized surgical operations on patients under her father's protection, ignoring standard medical protocols entirely. The severe trauma patient admitted that morning was the latest victim of Lila's reckless negligence. The patient had been sent to the hospital after a traffic accident with non-life-threatening blunt force trauma, fully conscious, with stable vital signs and no fatal intracranial damage. Lila had insisted on performing emergency debridement and suture surgery independently overnight, ignoring repeated warnings from junior doctors and nurses that she was misjudging the patient's intracranial pressure and ignoring critical imaging indicators. Due to her brutal, unskilled surgical operation and catastrophic misdiagnosis, the patient suffered sudden intracranial hemorrhage and brain stem compression during the night, rapidly progressing to complete brain death long before dawn. By the time the morning shift arrived, the patient was already clinically dead, with zero chance of resuscitation. Faced with an irreversible medical malpractice death incident caused by his own daughter, Julian Croft did not choose to take responsibility, report the incident truthfully, or initiate official medical dispute procedures. Instead, he immediately activated his ruthless cover-up plan. He needed a scapegoat, a senior attending physician with impeccable professional credentials, no political background, and a clean disciplinary record, to bear the full legal, professional, and public blame for his daughter's fatal mistake. I was his perfect target. I had 7 years of zero medical errors, zero patient complaints, and zero disciplinary sanctions. I was the most outstanding young attending physician in the emergency department, with a high patient satisfaction rate and a reputable professional image. I had no powerful family background, no connections in the hospital's senior management, and always focused purely on clinical work, never participating in internal office factions or power struggles. Most importantly, I had just finished a night shift on duty, with official duty records that could perfectly prove I was the responsible physician on call for the patient's treatment window. Julian Croft's plan was cold-blooded and meticulous to the extreme. He would force me to scrub in on the already brain-dead patient, make me perform futile rescue operations on a clinically dead body, and then falsify all medical records, operation logs, and nursing shift records. He would alter the time of treatment, forge my signature on wrong diagnosis documents, and fabricate evidence that I had misdiagnosed the patient's condition, delayed critical treatment, and caused medical malpractice leading to patient death. With his family's judicial connections, he would ensure that I was immediately suspended, criminally detained, and formally prosecuted for medical malpractice and negligent homicide. The hospital would release one-sided, scandalous public statements, smearing my professional reputation completely, portraying me as an incompetent, reckless doctor who killed a patient through clinical negligence. Once the criminal conviction was finalized, my medical license would be permanently revoked, my 7-year medical career completely destroyed. I would serve years in prison for a crime I never committed, and the final, cruelest detail, the Premonition's last warning, was entirely predictable. My parents, two ordinary, honest teachers who had spent their lives proud of my medical achievements, could never bear the public scandal, the criminal stigma, and the shame of their daughter being a convicted medical felon. The endless public condemnation, neighborhood gossip, and social isolation would crush them completely, driving them to suicide. Every detail of the frame-up was precise, ruthless, and targeted specifically at destroying every part of my life. Julian Croft did not just want to cover up his daughter's mistake. He wanted to erase me completely, using my life, career, and family as a sacrificial pawn to protect his daughter's future and his family's reputation. As I leaned against the damp tunnel wall, sorting out the entire terrifying truth, the sound of urgent footsteps and angry shouts echoed faintly from the sidewalk far above the shaft opening. I held my breath instantly, my body going completely still, every nerve on high alert. Dr. Lawson's phone is still here. Her medical bag is left on the sidewalk. She didn't leave. A hospital security guard's loud, anxious voice drifted down from above. Check all surveillance immediately. She must be hiding nearby. Chief Croft ordered us to bring her back at all costs. She has to scrub in for the emergency surgery immediately. Another voice, colder and more urgent, belonging to the head nurse who had called me earlier, followed closely. The OR is prepped and waiting. The patient's family is arriving any minute, if DR. Lawson doesn't get back in 10 minutes. The whole cover-up collapses. Find her now. I closed my eyes briefly, a cold, sharp smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. They were not looking for me to save a patient. They were hunting for me to lock me into a death trap, to force me to bear the weight of their corruption and negligence. If I had hesitated for even 1 second, if I had trusted my professional instinct and turned back to the operating room, I would have been completely trapped, with no chance of defense or escape. The Premonition had saved my life. Now I would save myself and destroy every last part of Julian Croft's ruthless, corrupt scheme. I knew I could not stay hidden in the underground tunnel forever. The security team would eventually check the utility shaft, discover my escape route, and launch a full-scale manhunt. My temporary self-rescue was only the first step. TO completely reversed the situation, clear my name, and take down the powerful villain who wanted to ruin me. I needed solid, irrefutable evidence. For years of working in the emergency department, I had developed the habit of backing up all my clinical operation records, patient diagnosis notes, and shift handover logs on a private encrypted cloud disk, independent of the hospital's internal system. I had witnessed too many cases of hospital senior management falsifying internal records to protect their own interests, so I had long prepared for the worst, preserving every detail of my clinical work with absolute rigor. More importantly, I knew the fatal loopholes in Julian Croft's frame-up plan. All the hospital's internal surveillance in the operating wing could be deleted or modified by his administrative authority, but the public corridor surveillance, the roadside street camera system outside the hospital, and the independent time-stamped medical equipment operation logs could not be tampered with by hospital internal personnel. Most critical of all, Lila Croft's overnight unauthorized surgical operation had left indelible objective evidence. The real-time vital sign monitoring data of the patient, the anesthesia machine operation records, the surgical instrument usage logs, and the overnight nurse shift handover records were all stored in independent third-party medical equipment systems that even Julian Croft could not modify or delete. I also knew the key witness who could completely overthrow the frame-up, a junior night shift nurse named Mia, who had assisted Lila during the fatal overnight surgery. Mia had witnessed Lila's entire misoperation process, had repeatedly reminded Lila of her diagnostic errors, and had recorded every abnormal vital sign change of the patient throughout the night. Mia was young, unconnected, and had no stake in the Croft family's power. She was the most credible and crucial witness for the truth. My mind sorted out the complete counterattack plan in less than 3 minutes, calm, precise, and ruthless. I would not hide and flee in panic. I would fight back from the shadows, use the villain's arrogant negligence against him, collect ironclad evidence of corruption and frame up, and completely crush his attempt to ruin my life. I pushed off the tunnel wall, ignoring the throbbing pain in my ribs and shoulders, and began to navigate the dark underground tunnel system. I had grown up in the city, and I was familiar with the layout of the municipal underground tunnel network. I knew this utility shaft connected to the old downtown underground passage, which led directly to the back entrance of the city's Independent Medical Supervision Bureau, completely outside the jurisdiction of Northwood General Hospital and Julian Croft's power network. I moved quickly through the damp, narrow tunnel, staying low and silent, avoiding all patrol inspection points. The underground passage was quiet and abandoned in the early morning, providing me with perfect cover to move without being tracked. During my movement, I used my encrypted mobile phone to remotely log into my private cloud disk, backing up all my shift records, patient handover notes, and zero-error clinical operation records from the previous night, locking the data with triple encryption to prevent any tampering. I also sent an encrypted anonymous message to Nurse Mia, reminding her to immediately back up all overnight surgery records, vital sign data, and handover logs, and strictly preserve the original medical equipment data without handing over any original files to the hospital's senior management. I warned her in advance that the hospital was preparing a full-scale frame-up and record falsification operation, letting her know that her evidence was the key to exposing the truth. 20 minutes later, I successfully exited the underground tunnel from the old downtown passage, emerging into the brightening early morning light on a quiet street 2 kilometers away from the hospital. I was disheveled, covered in tunnel dust and damp grime, with bruised shoulders and aching ribs, but I was free, safe, and in full control of the situation. At this exact time, Northwood General Hospital was in complete chaos. Julian Croft, unable to find me after a full-scale hospital search, had already launched his pre-prepared frame-up operation without waiting for my return. He held an emergency hospital senior management meeting, publicly announcing that I had abandoned my post, refused to perform emergency rescue duties, and caused the death of a critical trauma patient due to dereliction of duty. He issued an official internal hospital suspension notice, immediately freezing my job position, revoking my clinical operation qualifications, and initiating so-called disciplinary investigation procedures. He instructed the medical record department to completely falsify all patient treatment documents, forging my signature on misdiagnosis and delayed treatment records, and prepared a one-sided public announcement to smear my reputation as a negligent, unprofessional doctor. He even contacted his contacts in the judicial department in advance, preparing to file a formal criminal report of medical malpractice and negligent homicide against me within the hour, aiming to lock me into criminal procedures before I had any chance to defend myself. All of his actions were arrogant and reckless, relying entirely on his absolute power in the local medical system. He believed that a powerless young attending physician could never resist his full-scale suppression, that I would be forced to surrender, flee, or be completely crushed by his power. But he had made a fatal mistake. He underestimated my vigilance, my preparation, and my determination to fight back. He thought he was playing a one-sided suppression game, but he had already stepped into the evidence trap I had laid for him. I stood on the quiet street, took a deep breath of fresh morning air, and opened the official complaint and reporting platform of the State Medical Supervision Bureau. Instead of making a noisy, impulsive public defense, I chose the most professional, most authoritative, and most lethal counterattack method. I uploaded all my encrypted original shift records, real-time handover notes, and third-party medical equipment operation logs one by one, forming a complete, unbreakable evidence chain. The data clearly proved that I had completed my night shift duties normally, had no treatment responsibility for the patient's overnight surgical accident, and had already left the hospital's duty area before the patient's brain death occurred. Then, I uploaded the key evidence of Lila Croft's unauthorized night surgery, misdiagnosis errors, and fatal surgical negligence, including third-party anesthesia machine data, real-time vital sign monitoring records, and preliminary witness statements from Nurse Mia. Finally, I submitted a formal public report on Julian Croft's abuse of power, intentional record falsification, official frame-up, and medical accident cover-up. The moment I submitted the full evidence report, the situation reversed completely and instantly. The State Medical Supervision Bureau's professional investigation team received my report and ironclad evidence within minutes. Unlike the local hospital's controlled supervision department, the state-level bureau was completely independent, unswayed by Julian Croft's local power and connections. The investigation team immediately launched an emergency special investigation, freezing all of Northwood General Hospital's self-conducted disciplinary procedures and medical accident identification results. Investigators rushed to the hospital within half an hour, conducting on-site inspections of all operating room equipment data, original medical records, and surveillance logs. Faced with unalterable third-party equipment data and complete witness testimony, all of Julian Croft's falsified records and frame-up evidence collapsed instantly. The investigation team confirmed the full truth of the incident. Lila Croft's unauthorized night surgery, clinical misdiagnosis, and surgical misoperation directly caused the patient's intracranial hemorrhage and brain death. Julian Croft intentionally falsified medical records, abused his administrative power to frame an innocent attending physician, and covered up his daughter's fatal medical malpractice in order to avoid responsibility. The entire hospital's senior management team was stunned into silence. All the staff who had participated in the record falsification and frame-up operation panicked completely, realizing that they had followed a corrupt leader to commit illegal acts, facing irreversible professional and legal punishment. Julian Croft, who had been arrogantly holding a management meeting to denounce my dereliction of duty and arrange my criminal pursuit, turned pale on the spot the moment the investigation team's preliminary conclusion was announced. His entire body trembled with shock, rage, and disbelief. He could not accept that his perfect power suppression plan had been completely overturned by the person he had regarded as a powerless pawn. The public opinion reversal followed immediately. The hospital's internal one-sided smear announcement was completely revoked and deleted. All local media reports prepared to discredit me were forcibly withdrawn. Instead, the official medical supervision platform released the full incident investigation report, publicly restoring my reputation, praising my rigorous clinical work attitude, my complete duty performance, and my brave exposure of medical corruption. The public who had been misled by the hospital's false information quickly understood the full truth. Netizens erupted in overwhelming praise and anger, condemning Julian Croft's abuse of power and ruthless frame-up, and affirming my innocence and professionalism. This doctor is a hero. She escaped a fatal frame-up with her calmness and professionalism. Powerful medical leaders cover up their children's mistakes and frame innocent subordinates. This is the darkest side of workplace corruption. 7 years of zero-error professional achievements are undeniable. The frame-up scheme is ruthless and disgusting. The Premonition saved her life, but her professionalism and vigilance saved her future. Faced with the complete collapse of the scheme, irreversible official investigation results, and nationwide public opinion condemnation, Julian Croft completely lost his former arrogance and power. He tried every means to use his connections to suppress the investigation, whitewash his crimes, and pressure me to withdraw the report, but all his channels failed completely in the face of state-level supervision and ironclad evidence. He rushed to find me in person, abandoning all his superior authority and dignity, begging me privately to withdraw the report, offering me huge sums of hush money, promotions, and hospital senior positions in exchange for forgiveness. Alara, I was wrong. I acted impulsively and confused right and wrong. I'll give you the chief emergency physician position immediately. I'll double your salary and grant you unlimited clinical resources. As long as you drop the investigation, I'll give you everything you want. I stood facing him, my expression cold and calm, no longer the subordinate who had once respected his professional authority. I looked at the man who had tried to ruin my career, destroy my family, and send me to prison for a crime I never committed, and rejected his hypocritical compromise completely. You didn't make a mistake. You made a deliberate choice to sacrifice an innocent person for your family's selfishness. You planned to ruin my career, destroy my reputation, and drive my parents to suicide. There is no forgiveness for premeditated evil. The final official sanction came down 3 days later, completing the thorough reckoning of all evil deeds. Julian Croft was officially dismissed from all hospital positions, permanently revoked of his medical practice license, and transferred to judicial organs for criminal prosecution on charges of medical malpractice, abuse of power, intentional falsification of medical records, and frame-up of innocent personnel. His decades of medical authority, career achievements, and family power foundation collapsed completely overnight. His daughter, Lila Croft, was permanently banned from engaging in any medical industry work, her medical license revoked for life, facing corresponding criminal liability for her fatal surgical negligence. All hospital personnel who participated in the record falsification and frame-up were disciplined, demoted, or dismissed, with relevant responsible persons facing administrative penalties. All the false charges against me were completely cleared. The hospital issued a full-page official public apology, restoring my professional reputation in all aspects. The State Medical Supervision Bureau issued a nationwide commendation for me, affirming my rigorous professional ethics, excellent clinical ability, and courage to expose medical workplace corruption. My career ushered in an unprecedented thorough counterattack and industry transcendence after the crisis. I was appointed as the new chief physician of the emergency department of Northwood General Hospital, undertaking the hospital's emergency critical care core work. I was invited to serve as a special supervision consultant of the State Medical Supervision Bureau, participating in the standardization construction of national medical clinical management and medical dispute supervision. I used my experience of escaping frame-up and fighting corruption to promote the reform of the hospital's medical record management system and third-party data supervision mechanism, completely eliminating the hidden danger of senior management abusing power to falsify medical records and frame subordinates, protecting the legitimate rights and interests of grassroots medical staff and the safety of patient medical treatment. I no longer live in the shadow of workplace power struggle and hidden danger. The supernatural premonition gave me the warning to save my life, but my 7 years of professional accumulation, rigorous work habits, and calm, rational judgment saved my entire life and future. In the medical industry, where power and interests are intertwined, professionalism is the strongest armor of every grassroots practitioner. Calm self-rescue is the most powerful counterattack against deliberate frame-up. All corrupt power that tramples on justice and sacrifices innocent people will eventually be completely crushed by absolute truth and ironclad evidence. I survived the abyss I jumped into. I defeated the ruthless power that tried to bury me. I rose from the brink of ruin to stand at the peak of my profession. This is the final victory of justice, professionalism, and desperate self-rescue.